The dining hall on the upper level of the Oravathi Palace held the particular silence of a room that had forgotten what it was for. 648 chairs, one long table of pale stone, 17 imported floor types beneath it, a vaulted ceiling that pulled every small sound upward and scattered it into nothing. The overhead lights ran at 60%. Nobody had thought to adjust them. There was no one to adjust them for. At the head of the table, Empress Vyeth ate alone, knife fork to plate, plate to mouth. The scrape of silver on ceramic traveled the length of the hall and came back diminished, a ghost of itself, too tired to mean anything. Around her 647 chairs sat in their places, aligned untouched. The second chair from the head had a thin coat of dust on its seat. Kitchen staff had stopped wiping it 8 months ago. There had seemed no reason. And the Oravathi were a people whose constellation freckles responded to emotional state the way weather responds to pressure, gradually, then all at once. During sustained loneliness, the freckles dimmed, pulling inward like stars at the edge of a dying system. The cluster called the Oravus Nebula, which typically spread across the left cheekbone in a pattern of 9 gold points, had gone completely dark on Empress Vyeth's face 4 months prior. Physicians had noted it. None had said anything. She had been eating alone for 1,200 days. The number had a texture to it now. She did not think about it directly. She thought around it, the way one learned to walk around a broken tile on a floor one crossed every evening. The trade negotiations had collapsed in the 4th year of her reign, pulling 3 allied systems with them. Delegations had withdrawn, politely in sequence, citing scheduling conflicts that became permanent. The press had given her a name, the Hollow Throne, which she had read once and not read again. Her advisors ate in their offices. Her guards ate in the corridor outside. The kitchen sent one covered plate at 2030, collected at 2100, and asked no questions. That was the arrangement. She lifted her fork, set it down, lifted it again. Outside, the station's ventilation moved air through the hall, and the sound it made was the only sound that was not her. The gold brown of her gown caught the dim light and gave it back as something older. The thin band of her crown sat low, as it always did in the evenings when no one was watching. A single clasp at the collar. No gemstone. She had stopped wearing the stone somewhere in the 3rd year. She could not have said exactly when. 647 empty chairs. 1 plate. Marin Voss had been on station for 11 days and had not yet learned that Protocol 14C existed. This was, in retrospect, the detail that changed everything. He was 34 years old, average height, broad-shouldered in the way of a person who had carried things for a long time rather than lifted weights. His hands were worn. The right palm had a callous ridge from the mop handle that his mother had once told him made him look like a man who worked for a living, which he had taken as a compliment. His badge, and issued on day 1 by a processing clerk who had been on their 3rd coffee and not paying close attention, read, Marin Voss, Dining Wing. The wing was called the Dining Wing. Nobody had corrected it. He had not pushed. Night shift, dining level. His route was corridors B through F, the service entrance, and the outer hall. He had done it 10 times. He was good at it. He was quiet. At 2047 on night 11, he turned the corner into the upper dining hall because the outer hall was already done, and his route sheet said upper level, full sweep, and he had not yet learned that full sweep had an asterisk, and the asterisk led to Protocol 14C. And Protocol 14C said, not during meals. He stopped in the doorway. A woman sat at the head of a table that could seat 600 people. She wore a crown, one plate in front of her, 647 empty chairs around her, but the hall hummed with the sound of its own size. He stood there for a moment with his mop. A janitor had no business noticing that an Empress was eating alone. But he noticed. He should have backed out. Any reasonable person would have backed out. Marin Voss set his mop against the doorframe. He walked the length of the hall. His footsteps on 17 types of imported stone made 17 slightly different sounds, and they arrived at the head of the table ahead of him, like announcing him to a woman who had not looked up. He stopped at the second chair, the dusty one, the one that had not been touched since before anyone bothered to track it. He pulled it out, sat down. No plate, no food, no invitation, no clearance, no title, no reason that would have survived 15 seconds of formal examination. He sat down. The empty chair held his weight. Viath's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. The constellation freckles on her left cheekbone. The dark ones, the dead ones, did not move. Neither did she. The chair sat between them like a word no one had said in 3 years, still warm from being spoken. If you've ever watched something begin, really begin, not announce itself, just quietly start. Stay here. There's more. The fork was still in her hand. Viath did not move for a long time. This was not a choice. Her body had simply stopped consulting her. 11 words existed in Old Oravathi for the specific weight of loneliness, each one precise, in each one carved from a different depth of the feeling. There was no word in any dialect she knew for when loneliness ended. The language had never needed one. The man beside her smelled like floor soap and recycled station air. He had broad shoulders and a badge that said something wrong, and he was sitting in the dusty chair as though he had done it before, as though sitting in a chair were an ordinary thing a person did, which she understood, intellectually was true. He looked at her plate. "That smells good," he said. She did not answer. 1 minute. The ventilation moved through the hall. 2 minutes. The dim overhead lights held their 60% and offered nothing. And then, on her left cheekbone, in the cluster that physicians had documented as clinically dark for 127 days, one freckle lit, a single point of gold. Faint. The way a star looks when you are not quite sure you are seeing it or only wanting to. Viath touched her face. Her fingertips found the warmth before her mind did. It had been 4 months since that cheekbone had been warm. She lowered her hand. "Why did you sit down?" The question came out quieter than she intended, the way things do when you have not said certain words in a long time, and your voice has partially forgotten the shape of them. Marin Voss looked at her, not at her crown, not at the freckles, not at the architecture of the room she occupied. At her. "Why, I just didn't want you eating alone." 7 words, no ceremony. The kind of sentence a person says when they mean it completely and have not thought to dress it up. And because it was simple, it went in clean. 2 more freckles returned. Collarbone, temple, small gold lights coming back into a sky that had been dark for 3 years. Not dramatically, not all at once, just deciding, one by one, that there was something worth illuminating. She made a sound she had not planned. Small. The kind a body makes when something restarts that had been off long enough that it had started to feel like off was permanent. She looked at the far end of the table. 646 empty chairs beyond this one. She looked at the chair beside her, The night shift log noted. Subject sat down. Diplomatic incident followed. No incident report was filed. There was no formal category for what had actually occurred. He came back the next night. Same time, same chair. As she did not tell him to leave. On the third night, a second plate appeared at the head of the table when the kitchen sent the tray. No one on staff admitted to adding it. The order form showed one meal, as always. The second plate was simply there. On the fifth night, she spoke first. She told him about the gray stone in Corridor 7, the one cut from the Verath quarry that no longer existed. The only piece left of a planet that had been decommissioned before either of them was born. She did not know why she told him. He listened the way he mopped floors, steadily, without hurrying anywhere. On the seventh night, the kitchen received an updated standing order. 2 servings, 20/30. The guest register remained blank. It stayed blank. By the end of the second week, 11 freckles had returned across the Orivus Nebula cluster. The attending physician ran 3 scans, cross-referenced the data twice, and wrote in her private notes, no medical explanation. Recommend continued observation. She did not recommend changing anything. By the third week, kitchen staff had resumed wiping the second chair, and the chair was changing. Slowly, the way things change when they are used every day by the same person at the same time. The right armrest had begun to show the faint groove of a calloused palm, pressed there at 2047, night after night, for weeks that were becoming a count she had stopped trying not to keep. Staff wiped the armrest now too, carefully, and around the groove, preserving it without being asked. She never told anyone his name. But on the night all 9 Orivus Nebula freckles burned bright enough to cast their own light across the table, one of her corridor guards passing the hall entrance at 2026 heard her voice in the empty room. She was not on a call. There was no one inside yet. She was counting. 20 minutes. Her voice was low, not distressed, not formal. The voice of someone marking the distance between now and something they have decided they are allowed to want. The guard wrote nothing in the log. The second chair sat in its place at the head of the long table, the dust long gone, the groove worn into its right armrest by a calloused palm that arrived every night at exactly 2047, and the 9 gold points of the Orivus Nebula on her left cheekbone held their light in the dim room, steady and quiet, and like stars that had remembered they were allowed to exist. That chair started with dust on its seat and one woman counting down 20 minutes in an empty room. If something in this story stayed with you, come back tomorrow. We'll be here, and so will the next one.